Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Well Played, presented by theSkimm, the only podcast dedicated to treating the sports world like the bingeable TV it actually is. Each week on Well Played, we do what theSkimm does best, provide gold medal takes and detailed breakdowns of the biggest sports stories and controversies you care most about. I'm Blake Lou Merwin.
And I'm Amanda Duran. Today, we are again covering the biggest sporting event of the summer, the 2024 Paris Olympics. Every Tuesday and Thursday from now until the closing ceremonies, we'll bring you the latest news surrounding the games, keep you up to date on the medal count, and discuss the events that everyone is talking about.
If you're loving the show, be sure to hit follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening right now. Leave us a review and tell your friends about the show too. And if you happen to be listening to this episode of Well Played on the Skimm This feed, please make sure you're searching for Well Played on your favorite podcast app because the show has its own shiny new feed and we don't want you to miss an episode. So Amanda, it's time for a medal count update. We are roughly 5 days into these Olympic Games, and as we're recording this episode, here's where we stand with the medal count. So, the United States leads in total medals with 20, including 3 golds. France is in second place with 16 total medals, and China and Japan are tied for third with 12. Japan actually has the most golds with 6, while France, China, Australia, and South Korea are all just one behind them with 5 golds. And so, Amanda, I'm curious, how have you been enjoying the coverage so far? Have you been watching a lot of streaming? Are you watching the primetime coverage? Tell me about your Olympic watching experience this time around.
I mean, I feel like the Olympics are inescapable this year.
It's
and
true.
I mean that in the best way. I feel like this is the first time in a while. Like, it's rare these days where you get monoculture. My whole feed is Olympics. So honestly, Blake, when am I not consuming content around the Olympics? I'm getting it. I basically have it on when I'm home. It's on. I either have the Gold Zone where you can chaotically see 4 things happening at once. Probably not good for somebody prone to overstimulation. I feel a little bit manic all of the time. I like to watch that, or I'll just watch one event at a time, and then I'll watch social. I haven't really caught the prime time much, but I hear they add a lot of programming to sort of make it like a real cool several
live
hour
TV
event.
experience.
But like,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, where are the stands? That's why we're here. By the time 8 p.m. rolls around Eastern time, we already know what's happened.
You've already seen it all.
But I mean, sometimes a lot of these games, a lot of things happening, they're worth watching twice. How have you been watching it?
I have also been watching just like background on the screen all day. I'm on Peacock. That's where I'm watching it. I do think when we get back to the office after this recording, we should be streaming it in the office.
I think the full office will be in support of that because it is gymnastics.
Yes, It is Gymnastics Day. I also want to call out, you might notice I have a little bit of a deeper voice. I got sick on purpose, so I would sound better for this podcast.
Background singer at the opening ceremony, and you just
lost it last week at the opening ceremony. No, I did have a sore throat this weekend. If you noticed me sounding a little manlier than usual, you know why. Yeah. I'll say it. I sound manly.
You sound like a podcast host.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, you sound great.
Anyway, as always, each episode of Well Played starts with a press box. It's a roundup of our favorite stories dominating your feeds this week, and it's time for the press box.
All right, so we got to start with our reactions to the opening ceremonies. We had some strong opinions about this, previewing it last week, so it's only fair that we revisit them and see how our predictions fared. Now that they're in the rearview mirror, what did we think? What kind of reactions have you been hearing? What's your group chat been saying? I know mine was lit up. Would you amend any of your statements from the last time we talked about this?
I mean, I think
you were very pro.
I know. We're gonna go back. I was very pro. You were anti,
yes,
for different reasons, obviously. But I think that we both failed to consider inclement weather.
We absolutely did,
which is crazy of us. I don't know how we.
I projected so much anticipatory anxiety on this. I was like putting myself in the shoes of the event organizers. I did not think of the rain. It was like really.
It was quite bad. It was not good.
No, it was raining buckets.
Yeah, so
it was tough.
I think once the rain kicked in, which was pretty early on, honestly, kind of killed the vibe. But I will say, I think like if I was a spectator, I saw some TikTok videos of people watching from the sides of the Seine. It was looking a little odd as a spectator in person. However, I think like the live TV, it was produced for TV.
They did a beautiful job. Yes,
because exactly. I mean that's how most people are watching. Most people aren't going to Paris, France, to watch these live opening ceremonies.
Did you see? I saw one TikTok where the person was like, "I paid €1,600 for a ticket," and then they showed what their sort of POV was, and
like a ticket for the opening. You have to buy a ticket for just the opening ceremony.
This guy did.
Damn.
Maybe it was like a specific privileged area where he was standing with his family, but yeah, he seemed a little.
There's a privileged area to see that? Are you kidding?
I know.
Damn. Scam of the century, I'll say.
And we talked on our first episode about the USA uniforms. We specifically spent a lot of time on the jeans. Another thing we didn't consider. to be in a drenched pair of jeans
Wet,
for several
soggy.
hours. Hell. I can't really tolerate discomfort of any kind. I cannot imagine. They looked fine. They looked slicker than I expected them to until they got drenched and were literally too slick.
They should just be grateful. This is not the year 2010 when skinny jeans were at their peak.
Oh my God.
Because if I had to be stuck in a pair of tight ass skinny jeans raining
Getting
Olympic
those
ceremonies,
off,
you'd be there for hours.
That's an Olympic sport in itself, getting those jeans off. I definitely agree with you. I thought it was quite cool. I mean, in terms of a production made for TV with like a strong perspective and point of view and really interesting elements, they definitely pulled it off. They did something really cool and interesting.
That was very journalistic of you. Like it needs to have the point of view.
Right. I mean, it definitely did, and we'll get into it. But in terms of like an opening ceremony, I mean, as we said last week, it's like if you have a contained area, I mean, obviously everyone was comparing it to Beijing. It was its own thing. You can't really compare it to previous iterations. I do think that I hope the LA organizers took a note to maybe keep things contained, keep in mind, you know, the performance value, the production value for the people there on the ground and the people watching from TV. I will say, like, once the sun set, it was much like, obviously, Paris, City of Lights. It was
More
much
dramatic.
cool. I mean, Celine's performance, can't really imagine that. Like, that did really pack a punch outside in Paris with that backdrop compared to just like a random stadium.
Yeah. I don't know. It was very campy, but in a good way.
Totally.
You know? But there was one part of the opening ceremony that drew scorn and condemnation from religious leaders over the weekend. And I mean, I think you know what scene I'm talking about. In the scene, some thought it appeared to depict a parody of The Last Supper, with a woman wearing an ornate headdress placed at the middle of a long table with drag queens flanking her on each side.
POV.
So,
Strong POV.
Amanda, what did you think of this scene when you first saw it? Was it giving Last Supper vibes to you?
You know, it's hard to say because I feel like The Last Supper it's like people are acting like it's a very particular scene that has only been created once, but it's like it's a row of people.
Yeah.
It's a row of people sitting on one side of a table. So I think I saw that and I was like, oh, this is evoking some imagery that's been repeated over and over again. But then they said that it was like based on a Greek
Dionysus,
myth, Dionysus. I'm fairly convinced that that's what they were going for, but not everybody is. Some people were very offended and felt like it was really making a mockery of Christianity as a whole.
I believe event organizers. I believe them when they say that it was supposed to be depicting Dionysus, the Greek god of festivities and wine. However, I remember I clocked it when I was watching. I was like, okay, Last Supper. Yeah. Like, I did clock it myself, but I wasn't particularly
It was giving
offended.
Last Supper, for sure. I mean, I think, to me, how my sense of it is that were they going for a mockery of Last Supper by, again, this is a much more complicated conversation because then you're talking about like, does like LGBT representation, is that making a mockery out of Christianity? I don't think that was their intention. Surely in rehearsal, somebody was like, these guys seeing like what I'm
Y'all
seeing?
see what I'm seeing?
Yeah, the guy's blue, but you could also see this. But in that case, again, it's become such a if you're going to say that anytime there's, you know, interesting looking people at a long table, an animated conversation is evoking the Last Supper in an inappropriate way. You don't have the America's Next Top Model judging table. You don't have the Gossip Girl Thanksgiving episode. We would really be losing a lot. So I think the question is not, were they intentionally doing this? It's, ought they have seen this and thought this could be offensive? This could be interpreted the wrong way. We should maybe pull some of the elements back. I mean, I'm not a French culture expert, but I do know that like secularity is very important there.
True.
So if there's like any country that probably was not super willing or eager to be very deferential to like a particular religious point of view, any one of them, it probably is France. So I'm with you. It's like, I believe the event organizers. The question is if you think they owed it to the faith at large, like if they really should have pulled it back after identifying that. Again, to me, that's like quite a slippery slope. Then you just lose a lot of imagery. I mean, all my wedding pictures are just a lot of people at one side of a table, and at no point were we like, I don't know, it's giving. I mean, they were like, it's giving Last Supper. We're not like, well, it might be offensive. So
I think that was a mic droppable response. I think we can move on to the next bit of the press box.
Okay, Blake, next up in our press box today. For our next item, we're talking about perhaps the biggest scandal among teams actually competing at the Games. So not an opening ceremony scandal. This is an actual athletic. We are finally getting to the athletic scandals themselves. I am, of course, talking about the Canadian women's soccer team, which was caught using a drone to spy on New Zealand before their group play match. This is wild. Early last week, New Zealand's team reported to French police that they saw a little something. They saw a little something
floating in the air
when they were practicing. They reported to police that a drone was spotted flying over their practice sessions. Within days after that, Canadian head coach of the Olympic team, Bev Priestman, she was suspended by FIFA and voluntarily left the Olympic Games. So French authorities were able to trace the drone back to this guy, Joseph Lombardi. He is a staff member of Canada Soccer who was directed to gather the footage from one of Priestman's assistants.
Big woof, man. Team Canada was subsequently issued a 6-point deduction, which they're currently appealing. And they ended up defeating New Zealand and France in their first 2 games, but they are still in 3rd place among their group with 0 points because of this deduction.
I would be really mad at my coach.
I'd be pissed. Yeah. I also am like, I wonder, I mean, I don't want to start any trauma, but I'm like, do the players know about this?
Right.
If so, I'd be so, that would really muck up my relationship with my coach, because it's like, you just...
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear this is just like a suspension. Maybe this coach will still be in the picture.
Yeah.
I mean, they can still qualify and win their final game against Colombia on Wednesday of this week, but it's unlikely they'll make it to the medal rounds because of the cheating penalty. Blake, you grew up playing soccer.
I did. I played travel soccer.
Coach have like a drone to catch the other kids'
Coach Blaustein was pretty competitive, but he was not risking it all with a little drone.
Not risking it all. I mean, do you think this punishment fits the crime? How do you interpret this pretty serious punishment for the players to punish something the coach did?
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that really struck a chord with me, because again, like, you have so much. It's such a big relationship, coach and team, and it's like you look to the coach as being a leader of your team in some ways. Obviously, there's a team captain or whatever, but that's just such a great breach of trust, which is why I'm wondering if the players knew. But more than the law and order of this discussion, I'm just like, guys, a drone? Are you serious? Whatever happened to a covert operation?
Totally.
What happened to spies? Bring back a spy. Like, I mean, I don't condone cheating. You heard it here first. I'm looking all through cameras. I do not condone cheating.
Get somebody on the inside.
But get a little creative. Totally. I mean, like, that was just such a obvious.
Right. And this isn't the first time they've done this. They started looking into more recent cases. Like, this is sort of like a practice that this coach has. So I cannot imagine that this coach is going to be a member of the organization much longer. It doesn't seem like the players knew, and their whole response has been like, how can we've been fighting for this our whole lives for this moment, and you're going to punish us. Unfortunately, like, not to sound like a cop, but like punishments are deterrents, and it might just take a really intense punishment of the entire team to demotivate coaches from doing this in the future. I mean, I just watch, it's like, I don't know, I hate cheaters. I know everybody does, but it's like, if you're not good enough to just win, then maybe it's not for you.
Maybe it's not for you. Yeah. But also, it's like
trust your team enough.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you just like trust in their abilities
and your own abilities, right? Like, you've also been working for this.
If I were a player, I would be unbelievably pissed. It would feel very unfair. But as an outside observer, again, in the interest of deterrence, if you just let the coach go, like, that's not really enough. That's not enough to keep, then the next time a coach considers doing it, they're going to be like, well, worst case scenario, they just let me go and it doesn't affect the team.
I'm really mad about this one.
I know. And Canadians are so
jolly and
so
kind.
Nice. They don't deserve this. Yeah. All right, what's next in the press box, Blake?
We're going to end on a lighter note.
Yes.
Because I think we need it after that upsetting conversation. We got to talk about the viral swimmer who took the Olympics by storm this weekend. And I'm not talking about Caleb Dressel or Katie Ledecky or any of the other swimming stars racing in the pool. I want to talk about Bob the Cap Catcher. Try saying that 3 times fast. If you haven't seen him on social media, let me catch you up. So during the women's 100-meter breaststroke on Sunday morning, American Emma Weber lost her swimming cap. It floated to the bottom of the pool. Now, instead of diving down to get it herself, which you might expect, she can swim. We know that.
She can swim quite well.
Organizers called up the designated cap retriever, now dubbed Bob the Cap Catcher, and he walked out in the most stylish floral print Speedo you'll ever see and dove down to fish it out himself. Now, fans are already speculating, or have been speculating, about his identity. Who is this man? According to an Olympic representative, he's in fact a lifeguard, or he was in fact a lifeguard, but Bob has opted to keep his identity a secret for the time being. So my question for you, Amanda, have you seen a better viral moment this summer than Bob the Cap Catcher? And can you think of a more heroic way to start the games? I mean, not all heroes wear caps.
Not all heroes wear
They
caps,
sure don't.
but they do retrieve them. I mean, this felt like a fever dream. This was one of those moments that I was catching on social before I really clocked what was happening. And I thought it was a sketch. I thought it was maybe like a shy streaker.
He literally was like so casual with getting.
Very casual.
He's not like the ball boys or girls in tennis who like they sprint out there. He was like taking his time.
A calmer dude. You would think this guy was a lifeguard at like your community
local pool.
I just thought it was so funny and silly that like there's no official uniform. Like there was no and again, we're in Europe. There was no like in the US, like that guy would be in a full body wetsuit.
Oh, def.
He would be running out very fast. This guy just very leisurely pace. I found it a little bit inspiring. I was like, this guy doesn't have a care in the world. He wasn't like, oh no, I didn't get a spray tan. Oh no, I don't have a six pack. He was just like,
people were coming for
there.
his body, and I was like, that's so wrong.
Body shaming Bob,
literally
the cap catcher.
Yes, body shaming Bob the cap catcher.
We cannot have that. No, I found him inspiring. You know.
I think we can all take a couple lessons from Bob the cap catcher.
Yeah, you know what? I hope we see him again. I hope he makes another appearance. I hope he has a wardrobe of Speedos that he's planning
to show off.
Debut. If I were a swimmer, I might just sort of like nix my cap off.
If you're watching this and you're an Olympic swimmer, just take it off.
Yeah, just
take one for the team. Take it off.
We need more Bob. We need more Bob. All right, so that is it for our press box today. Press box for opening weekend in the books. Now we'll turn our attention to the sport I'm most interested in watching today as we're recording this, and there are going to be many more opportunities to watch throughout the next 10 days or so, women's gymnastics. So competition for Team USA, it's currently underway as we record this episode. It's ongoing. The Americans, led of course by Simone Biles, Suni Lee, and Jordan Childs, dominated qualifying on Saturday. Super fun to watch, edging out second place Italy by over 5 points. Simone and Suni also qualified to represent the team in the individual all-around later this week. But today, we are focused on watching these incredible women compete for the team gold. Their top challengers include China and Brazil, along with Italy, and nothing is guaranteed. I mean, we know the U.S. has a stacked team. They historically perform really well as a team in all of the events, but it's going to be competitive. And like we've discussed, it's kind of fun to watch when it's competitive. We will be watching from the office, hopefully not disturbing our coworkers with our cheering. So during qualifying, I think the big thing everyone was talking about was you may have seen that Simone Biles seemed to be suffering from what might be a fairly significant calf injury, enough that she was at some points kind of crawling. She seemed to be visibly in pain and trying to avoid exerting herself, which is hard to say, like watching what she was doing. But so let's kind of start there. I mean, how do you see this injury affecting Simone? Her coaches have really not spoken much about it. In interviews, they'll sort of say, you know, she's fine. You'll hear more about it. We'll see where things are going. Everything's fine. Something that I was thinking about, and we sort of have talked about this in prior episodes and has been a conversation around Olympics and the gymnastics especially, is that previous iterations of this team, different generations of American gymnastics have been pretty brutal and have really encouraged performing at this high level when you're injured. We talked last week, and it's a really vivid memory for a lot of, I mean, most of the country, whether you're a gymnastics fan or not, when Carrie Strug was, again, visibly in agony, but chose to keep going and perform to get her team gold. And even in Simone Biles Rising, they sort of, a documentary on Netflix about her sort of return to competition, they kind of allude to the fact that, like, we should be, that was too much. That was quite a lot. And this is not necessarily a standard that we should set or expect from our athletes now. But I find, and I totally agree with that.
So in the documentary, they compare, or they talk about Carrie Strug.
Yeah, it's just sort of like the context of gymnastics and sort of like comparing Simone's kind of like mental health and twisties issues with like, this is an opportunity where an athlete was like, I'm going to prioritize myself. And so watching that, of course, you're nodding along. You're like, of course, nobody should ever compete when they're in any pain. And then we're watching Simone. She seems to be in some sort of pain and likely to compete. And I found myself questioning, my earlier perspective. It's like, and you and I have talked about this off mic a little bit. It's like you're preparing for this, where do you kind of like draw the line? Like, when is it too much? Who gets to decide? I mean, it is a little bit hard to watch, but it's also hard to expect her to walk away.
Yeah. I've heard that the U.S. coaches, the coaches of the gymnastics teams, have basically tried to like not put the pressure on Simone.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know what happened at Tokyo, and of course her mental health, like her subsequent mental health issues that she had struggled with. So I don't think they told her like, you don't have to compete in anything you don't want to.
Of course.
However, knowing how much of like a goat she is for the sport, she probably wants to come back from that, from the twisties that we, have talked about in the last Olympics. Like, I can't imagine that she would, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what she's thinking.
Right.
Honestly.
It's not just like my calf hurts, I'm done. You know? And again, we don't know the severity of the injury.
Exactly. And as an athlete, obviously she's been to so many Olympics, but you've been training for this for a long time. And also we did talk about last week how she is like the oldest gymnast, U.S. women's gymnast since like the 50s. Who's to say that there will be another Olympics for her, you know? And if that's the case, she probably wants to give it her all and really perform. Yeah. And I don't know. I can't imagine being an athlete and having to like, it just, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's like, it reminds me of how a lot of us aren't professional athletes, but even in our profession, we'll talk about like, oh, I don't want to burn out. I don't want to push myself. I don't want to live for work. And then you find in those moments when there is a big project, you're like, why am I actually working like, it's when you're in the moment and you've worked and you know the payoff is going to be so strong. So it's an interesting conversation about balancing, you know, what she has to lose, what she has fought for. And again, you guys will know later on today after this event airs. I am hoping that it is, you know, not a significant injury and she's just being really conservative and just taking all the pressure off her leg when she can to avoid it getting worse. But, you know, Simone Biles, I trust her with my life. If she feels,
never met her once, but
if she feels like this is the time to take a step back, which she has done literally on some landings to be a little bit more secure in those. But, you know, it would be such a shame, but like that's life sometimes. Like none of us want her to destroy her calf in the interest of another gold medal. And I don't think she does either. I think she's I definitely think she's sort of more emotionally healthy than Carrie Strug in 1996.
And she's definitely taking, I mean, I watched an interview with her before.
I trust her to make the right choice.
Yeah, I mean, she also has said like, you know, things are not as easy for me now. Even though she's only 27, she's just like, it takes me longer to recover and really take care of myself. So I think that's probably top of mind for her too. We'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, Simone, as you enter your 30s, just so you know, you get the twisties from walking up a spiral staircase, bending over to pick up your dog's poop, you'll get the twisties. I get the twisties from half a margarita. So it's coming for her. But
so do I. But so what does this mean for me? Anyway, that's another episode.
You're getting some strong margaritas. So another question as we prepare to watch today and the individual and team events, Suni Lee edged out Jordan Chiles by the narrowest of margins to grab the second spot for the individual all around coming up. So each country only gets to send 2 onto the finals.
Oh my God, that was
Can you just imagine?
That was so hard to watch.
They're so close.
For people who maybe didn't tune in, basically, Jordan Chiles came in 4th place, but because of this 2 per country rule for the finals, she's not able to compete. So even though she is literally, of all the gymnasts who competed, in the top 4, just trailing behind Suni and Simone, she's not able to compete.
Her American teammates are too good.
God, they're too good. And it was just so hard to watch Suni come off the bars and like react to her score because she knew she beat out Jordan Chiles, and obviously she probably wanted to celebrate, but her teammate was right there and it was literally so close. I think it was like 2/3 of a point basically. So she exuded a lot of like restraint in that moment. I think it would be really hard to like want to celebrate your win and then feel like you can't because someone who's,
I mean, it's an unfortunate situation for them both. It's like I'm sure Suni genuinely was like felt not just that she couldn't perform the excitement, but she was like, with this comes somebody I'm super close with not getting an opportunity. And as you said, not because they were not among the best, but because of the specific rules. You know, again, like they know the rules coming in. I'm sure it wasn't a huge shock to them. Right. But yeah, it was so hard to watch.
It was so hard to watch.
They're such girls.
Yeah, I see the TikToks of them. I'm like rooting for them so much. But, for Suni, at least, it was, let's talk about her because she also they both fought really hard, but especially Suni. She had to take a couple months off from gymnastics within like recently. She only started training for the Olympics again, basically like 7 months before Paris because she has this kidney disease, I believe, that restrained her from practicing, and her hands were getting so swollen she couldn't even fit into the grips for the bars. She also dealt with, I was reading this feature of her in the New York Times. She had stalkers after she came back from Tokyo.
My God.
She felt really unsafe at college. She basically ended up taking all of her classes online because it was like being on campus was just too much for her. So she really had to fight for that position. Mm-hmm. For her position on the team, but also just to return to her sport. I can't even imagine. Imagine taking 7 months off of work and react. It's so different because it's physical sport, but I can't even imagine.
Right. incredible, like so many, I don't want to call them sort of redemption narratives because none of these women have fallen very far.
Yeah.
But obviously some really rewarding moments to watch, and it's what makes the Olympics the Olympics.
Seriously, I mean, I'm thinking just on that team alone, like her story, Suni's story, and Simone's story of just returning to the sport after the last Olympics. So much has happened since then.
And I'm sure they are both super motivated. They'll be in the individuals later this week. Today is the teams. I'm sure they are more motivated than ever to make sure their teammates, including Jordan and Jade Carey, who was also not feeling well. Like, I'm sure they're so motivated to help them get, do play their part to get a medal for the team.
I'm sure the rainy opening ceremony did not help. Although, were they on the boat?
I know Simone did not go.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was.
I've
read she's really avoiding the press, like just anything that can sort of like maybe trigger her feeling, a lot of pressure, really overburdened. I wondered if maybe she just like didn't want to stand, like if her calf was already bothering her. But yeah, she's protecting her peace, so bless her.
I need to do some of that.
Yeah.
Let's talk basketball. The U.S. women's team tipped off yesterday in a victory over Japan. The American team has Belgium up next on Wednesday. So, Amanda, what did you notice in their first game? Did anything stand out to you in particular?
With this particular team, something the commentators kept saying over and over again, which they didn't necessarily need to, was the phrase size differential.
No, I heard vertically challenged.
No.
Describing Japan's team. I am so serious. The commentator was literally like, I'm 5'8", so maybe I shouldn't be saying that.
Well, they're also not vertically... everyone looks vertically challenged next to Brittany Griner. Like, these were not short women.
Yeah, wait, what
But if
saying?
you're playing Brittany Griner, who I believe is 6'9".
She is 6'9".
And Brianna Stewart, who's 6'4", and I think Asia Wilson's 6'4" as well. I mean, they definitely had a advantage in terms of the height. However, especially in the first quarter, like Japan was draining threes. Like they were really performing incredibly well. Towards the beginning, one of the players who again was probably like a tall person by most standards, but looked very diminutive next to Brittany Griner. She kind of blocked her, sort of like knocked it out of her hands, and it was really impressive. So for the first half, it was a little closer than you might expect, and then the third and fourth quarters, the U.S. like really locked it up. But like I said, Japan did really, really well with 3-point shooting. But I mean, just. This team looks great, and they look really motivated. I mean, this was their 56th consecutive win for an Olympic game. They're going for their 8th gold medal. If they get that, I think they'll beat the longest running consecutive medals. They'll beat the USA men's basketball team, which did that not recently. It was like over a couple decades ago. But again, and I mentioned this last week, like if you're a WNBA fan, it's just so fun to watch these players play with each other when they normally are playing against each other. I mean, a lot of the commentary I saw was that just like, Brianna Stewart and Asia Wilson on the same team is not fair. Like it's not fair. Well, they're both incredible. They both score oftentimes, most of the time, in excess 20 points a game. They did so yesterday. I think Asia Wilson got 24. Brianna Stewart got 22. Sabrina Ionescu, I'm wearing her Nike shirt today. She had an incredible game.
So cute.
Played some good minutes, got a couple threes, which is really her kind of like, it used to be considered like the main thing she brought to her game. But in the past, this season, especially in the WNBA, she's been getting crazy assists. She's been doing better in the paint. So it was kind of cool to see her kind of like return to her kind of like 3-point form. She certainly never lost.
Can I just say, I love hearing you talk in basketball speak. I could listen to it all day.
I'm sure I'm not as advanced as I could be, but I've picked some things up, I think. But yeah, I think the biggest headline coming out was that they looked great. As we mentioned, Japan got silver in the last games against the USA. They played great. It was a really fun game to watch. One thing I noticed personally was that people talk a lot about how physical the WNBA is. Yeah. And I haven't watched a ton of international basketball. I mostly am watching the WNBA, and compared to a WNBA, more like these women are like, they're following the rules, but they're pushing each other around. I didn't see as much of that. So it was interesting to see like, wow, they mean it when they say the WNBA is physical. A really funny moment was there was what I believe must have been a Japanese fan holding up a sign that said, "You need Caitlin Clark to beat us." And they actually beat them by like almost 30 points.
Damn.
And there's like pictures of the players kind of like reacting to that sign. So like we said, Belgium is also one of their biggest competitors. But again, it's just like, if you are a women's basketball fan, I think a lot more people are in the past year and have come to know this team, which really is kind of like a team of Avengers. It was really fun to watch.
The biggest headline to come out of this weekend that I saw involved legend Diana Taurasi, who gave a notable quote about people focusing on her age, because at 42 years old, she's had to field a lot of questions on the subject. In response to one of those questions, she said, quote, "I've gone back and forth with this answer, with these feelings about this question." And the quote continues, when you dedicate your whole life and your whole career to something and you get the question of why don't you just retire? And it's just so easy for a question to be brought up in a manner where it's not meant to be disrespectful, but if you're the person being asked, it is a bit disrespectful. And she concluded by saying, only a woman would have 20 years of experience and it's an Achilles heel instead of something that is treasured and used as a way forward for our sport and for women. So hopefully we can change that narrative. What did you think of Taurasi's quote? Like, does she have a point here?
Yeah. She definitely has a point. And I saw quite a bit of conversation about this. I think as women, when things are being said that might not, other people can argue out of them being sexist, but you kind of know when there is kind of a misogynistic tinge to them. Of course, there have been calls for male athletes who play for 20 years, who maybe are in their 30s or 40s, to retire if they are slowing down, if they are visibly maybe not at the top of their game. That does happen to men. But I think what she was referring to, I think she was making kind of a general statement about herself in basketball and women in general. I think she was referring to what she brings to the team in this circumstance, which is, that she's a super seasoned player. She knows how to, again, sort of help coach and guide the younger players in this type of environment. She's offering a lot. So I think that, it's one of those quotes where on its face, it could be really easy. And I saw people doing this say, what is she talking about? This actually isn't, this isn't the point. She's not making the point she thinks she is. Like men actually get this as well. But again, if you're a woman, when something is said to you with a sexist undertone. And I think it is. I think the way that people have talked about Diana Taurasi has been gendered in a way. And of course, not every conversation about athletes of a certain age retiring is. What I can't help but think is that the people that have these conversations about she's 42, she needs to retire, she's too old. The Phoenix Mercury coach and the Team USA coach, they're not doing their jobs are not charity. They're not let's have Taurasi
they're not trying to pity her,
right? So that we can give her another chance. Like we talked about. The reason Clark was omitted from the roster was that they felt like it was too risky. They wanted to win this gold medal. They weren't going to take a chance on it. Diana Taurasi is on the team she's on for a reason. She started in the game against Japan. She scores a lot of points in her games, and she offers, she's a seasoned player who can help guide other players, help mentor them. So to me, that's the biggest argument against her age. We see LeBron out there. He played a ton of minutes. He's 39. So I mean, he's and again, maybe people when he's 42 will ask for him to retire. So it was one of those quotes where it is easy for people to say no, it's actually not sexist. But again, when sexism is sort of being wielded against you. And I think that resonated with a lot of people who feel like specifically their age is used against them when they know they're at the top of their game. Sometimes maybe you're not, especially when it comes to a physical thing. But I don't really think that's an argument you can make about Diana Taurasi right now.
No, yeah.
All right, so we've talked about quite a few sports today, but we do want to do some honorable mentions, some events we haven't mentioned, but some stories that we have been watching very, very eagerly. Blake, you've got our top one, the man of the hour. Who is
Lil
it?
Clark Kent. That's what I'm calling him. That's what the internet is calling him. I was watching the men's gymnastics live yesterday when I was working, and I had my eye on Lil Clark Kent. His name is Steven Nedorosik. He was basically brought onto the team, the U.S. men's gymnastics team, solely to perform on the pommel horse. And he did it. He got the bronze medal for the men's U.S. team. First medal since 2008. And when I was thinking back, I was like, 2008 wasn't even that long ago. I forget that it was actually 16 years ago. Yeah. Let's not dwindle on that for too long. But I loved that he was just he was a one-hit wonder. Yeah. He came, he saw, he conquered. He took his glasses off. Apparently he has this condition where his eyes are constantly dilated, so that's why he wears his glasses. But when he takes off his glasses for the pommel horse to do this Olympic event. And he's like, I don't need to see when I'm on the horse. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Wow.
I walked down the...
need to see. I stand. Teaching it, Bob the cap catcher, teaching us a lesson in self-confidence. I feel like Steven, boundary king. He's like, I'm going to do one thing really, really well, and I'm going to nail it every time. Why you got me doing 5 things? I don't need to be a hyphenate.
No, I do not.
He's there with his Rubik's Cube. He's chilling out. He's watching his teammates. He delivered when I think the commentator, he is the reason why they got that medal. And the memes were just, they were just.
And I'm going to say, I was talking to you about this offline or off air, but I'll say it here. I saw him walk up to that pommel horse and I was like, he looks a little unassuming.
Right.
He just doesn't look as crazy beefcakey as the other gymnasts, but he slayed.
Totally. It seems like you got to kind of maybe be a little lighter to hold your, the lighter you are, the easier it is to hold yourself up like that. Incredible. I mean, it sounds like we maybe won't see too much more of him.
No.
But I mean, Steven Taurasi, our boundary king. Love it. Some other honorable mentions. So right before we started recording, or maybe a couple hours before we woke up, Coco Gauff was eliminated from singles, and people are furious, rightly. She's furious. Basically what happened was the way that the way that something was called, I think it was called out of bounds, and so she just sort of like hit it as like a throwaway. Like we were talking about this, like sometimes in basketball they'll call a foul. If you're like feeling it, you might just run up and shoot anyway. It doesn't matter. She had the impression that what she was doing in that moment was not going to matter, and then they later changed the call, and it resulted in her, I believe, losing the match. And this has happened to her before. She really challenged this. She had a conversation with the ref that was really devastating to watch. She was being really dismissive of her. She was really emotional. Of course she was. This is her first Olympics. She went to Tokyo and she got COVID and she couldn't compete. So this is something a lot of people are talking about today. Doesn't really look like something that's going to be reversed, but we've talked a few times this episode about how these very small moments that are often feel deeply unfair can completely, put an end to the story you've been writing for years and years and years. I mean, there was a judo athlete who had lost their first competition in 5 years, and on what was also kind of sort of a technicality. And when they lost that, they just like let out just sobbing. So there's been as many triumphant moments watching this. There's been some, and we've been talking about a lot of women. I think we relate to women that work really, really hard on things. And to see those moments, it's part of it. It's part of sport. But that's something that's really hard to accept, what seems to have happened to Coco this week. Last honorable mention, wanted to mention women's soccer because we got an excellent preview of this from Sam Mewis. If you missed our last episode, be sure to check that out. She gave us sort of a, what to be watching from this team. There's been a lot of discussion about the women's national team in soccer, kind of by a lot of measures and their own expectations underperformed in a recent World Cup. A lot of the headlines I've seen was that this team is strong. This team is here to win. What Emma Hayes has done is really working. They had beautiful performances against Zambia and Germany. Won both of those matches, won them with quite a bit of room. And I believe Sunday's USA-Germany match got 4.2 million viewers, which is a massive number and is reportedly more than any men's or women's match in the last 2 Olympics.
Wow.
So everyone does indeed watch women's sports.
So let's get into our next topic, which is all about diving. So as you may have seen, Bob is not the only diver in the Olympics. News alert. He sure is not. Swimming events in the Seine have been suspended for the past few days due to rain causing high pollution levels. And triathlon training was put on pause for 2 days straight.
Wow, we literally talked about this last week. We had a note that was like, well, this could be risky. If it rains a lot, immediately
and it literally rained. Maybe we manifested it with this podcast.
Yeah,
I
read a headline about one gentleman. I think he's a triathlon trainer, and he was trying to like acclimate himself to E. coli exposure in order to prepare to swim.
How do you do that?
Well, he said one of his methods was not washing his hands when he went to the bathroom.
Shut up.
That is not.
Why would you say that publicly?
Sir, you are not just impacting yourself when you do that. You are impacting everyone who dares to be around you, who dares to touch you. Like now, I mean, imagine being an athlete and just like casually reading that headline. You're scrolling at night. You're in bed. You've done a little bit of swiping on the apps, which apparently pop in, and you read this headline about this guy that you just like, he was in front of you at the Olympic Village buffet.
Oh my God.
And this guy's not washing his hands. Just another reason why it doesn't seem like this was the wisest decision. I guess we'll see over the next couple days. They either, if the Seine, like if the pollution levels don't get better, I think they have to just cancel the swimming portion of some of those events because I don't think the backups are going to work. We'll see. The Seine might be like the villain of this entire Olympic Games, sadly.
Well, funny you say that because we did actually get to talk to a actual diver who has dived in the Seine before.
She has.
And to help us understand just what Olympic diving is all about, we are thrilled to introduce our next guest.
All right, Blake, I think it's time for us to bring a pro into this conversation. Joining us now is Molly Carlson, a Canadian high diver and social media personality who is covering these Paris Olympic Games with NBC as a content creator, and she is there now. Thank you so much for joining us, Molly.
Thank you. Honored you called me a pro. Love this.
You are? Are you kidding me? Okay. So, I mean, your pro status has literally landed you in Paris and covering the games as a content creator for NBC Olympics. What is your goal for these games, and what types of perspectives and scenes are you hoping to share with your audience?
This is really refreshing, for NBC to hire a bunch of creators to come out to Paris and shoot content from a new perspective and from different voices. And like, I'm an athlete, but some of the creators have never seen athletic sports in their life. So they're literally going to be going to their first events and shooting content that kind of connects with their audience. And I think everyone has their own goals. For me, it's really just to enjoy myself. I didn't make it as a regular diver to the Olympics myself. So for me to make it as a content creator, I'm like, this is kind of a dream come true for me.
Totally. So one thing a lot of people are talking about is the River Seine. So you were part, I believe, of the Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series in 2022, right? And that was held in Paris. So you personally dove into the Seine, and you've said that it was kind of like a test run for like its safety and that experience. Again, there's obviously been a lot of conversation around the river, whether it's safe or pleasant to swim in for the game. So I just kind of want to know about your experience. Tell us about your experience in 2022 and your impressions of what was it like to swim in that river. How would you approach it as an Olympian this year?
La Seine is definitely interesting. I would say when they were like, can you go to this event and be one of the test athletes for the river? I was like, no. I was like, okay, here we go. But we did 2 events in Paris right into the river. And honestly, it was refreshing. Like, it was fine. Like, we're in
Okay.
there for 3 seconds.
Mm.
These swimmers that might be in there for hours may have a different story. But at the time, it was like, especially around the Eiffel Tower, it was all clean and it was
Yeah.
beautiful. So I was just nervous as the test athletes, but it was really, really just a cool experience. And I think the pictures
I was
are
gonna say
insane.
totally worth it. Totally worth it for the videos and the pictures because you did it.
I
She
was
does it
like,
right in front of the Eiffel Tower. You look like you're soaring above it. It's
oh
unreal.
yeah, I'll jump into anything for those pictures.
Do
I'm like,
anything
it's
for the
fine.
content.
And
Totally.
It was really cool.
the best part is that you live to tell the tale,
Literally.
So
We're out here
yeah,
sharing
you're
that
out
story.
here. Okay, so you have a huge social media following, as we know, and people absolutely love to watch you dive and behind the scenes footage of your sport. So why do you think diving in particular connects so much with this audience on social media, especially for people, I think I can speak for Amanda and myself, who are very scared of heights and like
Right.
don't really connect with the sport itself and like watch it or follow it?
I think what my content brings is relatability. You wouldn't put diving and relatable together ever, but the way I do it is because I'm an extreme cliff diver. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not in the regular Olympic level diving that you see pretty often. I'm going twice as high as these Olympic events, 20 meters high. I'm terrified every time I jump. Are you kidding? So what I kind of do with my content is show how scared I am, but then still do it anyways. And I think that relates to so many people is like, there may be so many things in your current life. You don't have to be an athlete at all. Maybe going for a new job or just challenges in your own life that you're nervous about, but you're ready for, and you still do it anyways. And I think that that's where I really gain this following is like, oh my God, she was terrified, but then she nailed it. And I'm like, yes.
So you just referenced something really interesting, which is that you're scared every time you do it. I, and like most of our audience, watched Simone Biles Rising and was surprised to hear her say something similar about her vault. She said, I'm scared every time I do it. And it seems like you don't actually, the most intimidating dives, it seems like they're not actually necessarily part of the things people practice day to day, including the Olympians. So I'm just kind of curious, like the things we're going to see that we're seeing these divers do in the games and that we do, are you doing them every day to practice, or do you practice a different way? What impact does that have on the body? Like, tell us how you prepare and how much it does or doesn't include those really intimidating
No,
dives
that's
and
such a good
maneuvers.
question because everyone's like, do you do this every day? Like, are you okay? And I'm like, no. So I think, yeah, I'm like,
Notable.
absolutely not. I think the thing about our sport and a lot of the sports you'll see at the games, I actually just watched Simone's training and she was doing that crazy vault, world's hardest vault, and she stuck it. And I was like, you go, girl. But having watched Simone and hearing her say that just kind of reminded me that, okay, like even the best in the world get stressed and get nervous, but they're so ready for it. And I think I need to remind myself that I've trained for 20 years to also be ready for the sport that I do. So when we go up to do it, when it counts, we definitely do only 1 or 2 per weekend when we're competing, because you're not doing it every day. Your body can't handle 70 kilometers an hour of impact all the time. So you need to give it, a lot of visual training. And I think that's where a lot of your mind comes into play with sport. Every athlete at this Olympic Games is visualizing the best outcome, and that will help. Hopefully they're visualizing the best outcome for themselves, but that'll definitely help their performance.
I think a lot of us kind of wonder, especially with some of the more unusual Olympic sports, like, how did you figure out you're so good at this? So I'm just curious, how does one discover that they are very good at diving? And secondly, how does one decide, you know what, I would actually love to try doing this from a great height? Like, how did this all start for you?
I think a lot of Olympic athletes start in their hometowns. It depends on the opportunities. There's summer camps, there's, school after programs. And for me, there happened to be an Olympic-sized diving pool in my backyard. And I was like, I guess I'll try diving. My sister was a swimmer, so I was always at the pool watching her. And I was like, this is boring. Don't tell the swimmers I said that. But I always wanted to flip. I was a gymnast for 2 years at like 7 to 9. And then when I was 10, I really made the switch because I did a summer camp in diving, and I jumped off that 10-meter Olympic platform and I said, I'm addicted. Like, I love it. I was a little daredevil. Now I'm like, I'm way more scared than I used to be, but I absolutely loved it. And I think that's where you have to have the passion for it. All these Olympians you'll see at these Olympic Games are started with a passion, and they just happen to be really good at it.
Absolutely. I love watching diving. I know it's one of the things I look forward to the most. I'm kind of curious, are there any, give us some BTS. Are there any unusual or weird behind the scenes preparations that divers are doing to get ready for their events? What are some weird practices you're doing that you just are so normal, but the average person might be like,
no, for real. You're like, give me the tea. What goes on in the training? No, it's so funny because of course you'd think divers literally just go in, do their dives, go home. But there's trampoline, there's, you're literally doing gymnastics in your training. Like, there's so much dry land before you go in the water, and ballet. There's so many aspects to this strength and conditioning. To be able to do the hardest dives in the world, which you'll see all Olympics, you need to be so fit in so many aspects of sports. So it's a really cool power and art sport connected that I think it's beautiful to watch.
Incredible. So how can people follow your coverage of these games? Where can they find your content?
For me, it's just follow my TikTok at Molly Carlson, and I'll be posting. It was funny, we got here and NBC was like, little update, you actually can't film any of the athletes in the field of play. And I was like, what am I filming then? So the IOC, the Olympic Committee, is so strict on who can film what, but that kind of makes it more fun for creators because we'll show the behind the scenes of the village. You know what I mean? And people care about that as well, because you can easily go and watch the events on Peacock, on NBC, whatever. But everyone wants the BTS of what's going on in Paris. So I think that's a really...
Listen, Molly, I would watch your content if it's just you eating a baguette on the street.
Nami literally rating 19 flavors of macaroons the other day. I was like, what am I doing?
Oh, incredible. Loved it.
That's what
we're here for. That's what we're here for. Thank you so much, Molly. And if our listeners read a news story about a woman just diving into the Seine from a great height,
there we go.
We'll know who it is.
It's safe.
We'll know it's Molly.
Thanks so much, Molly.
Thank you
so much. Have fun.
All right, so as always, we conclude every episode of Well Played with a game or segment prepared by our lovely producers here at theSkimm. And today's segment is called Torched. This is a collection of 3 people who got absolutely torched these past few days. One was torched by their coach, another by the audience, and the last torched by their employer. Ouch. Let's start with our first person to get torched. Reigning NBA champion and Olympic bench rider Jason Tatum. The Olympic bench rider. The producers wrote that in for me. I didn't want to say that, but I had to.
Merciless.
Yes, merciless. So Jason Tatum, despite leading the Boston Celtics to a championship just last month as undoubtedly the best player on his team, Tatum was one of only 2 players who received 0 minutes on the court during Team USA's 110-84 win over Serbia. Head coach Steve Kerr came out after the game and admitted that his exclusion had nothing to do with injury, but was simply a strategic choice based on matchups. So Amanda, I want you to rate this torching on a scale 1 to 5 flames.
Yeah. I mean, as everyone has said, I mean, Steve Kerr is like the most beloved coach of all time. Doesn't seem like he has a torching bone in his body intentionally. So I'm going to put it on a scale of maybe two flames. Like we've said, these teams are unbelievably stacked. This men's team is insane. Like to see LeBron, I mean, they're not both of the basketball teams are unreal. I think it's been a while since we've seen teams like this, maybe not ever. I mean, to have LeBron and Steph Curry, to have the roster that Steve Kerr has, you're gonna, like, the sixth player is gonna be somebody who's unbelievable. I don't know enough about the strategies around, you know, how they're trying to win these games. I am sure Jason Tatum will play. I also, I would be a little annoyed if he's frosty about this. We have no reason to think he is, but he's still at the Olympics. He's going to play. I think the humorous element is just seeing like a player of this quality left to the side. So I'm going to say I'm going to rate this torching just two flames for these. Yeah. All right. Next up, Blake, we have a story that a lot of people, including us, were eyeing with quite a bit of ire even before this guy arrived in Paris. I'm talking about Dutch beach volleyball player Steven van de Velde. This man was convicted of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl back in 2014 when he was 19 years old. For some reason, he has been permitted by his country to play in these Olympic Games. He is now 29 years old. He is representing his country in the Paris Games, but he was booed by fans when he stepped onto the sand this past Sunday against Italy. So fans passed the vibe check. Boos will undoubtedly continue to follow him throughout his time at the Olympics. After serving just 13 months in prison, the Dutch Olympic Committee concluded Van de Velde had met the conditions to return to competition. Crazy that the conditions even exist for this, and allowed him to resume his career in 2017. So, I mean, on a rate of I think we support. I think he has only been, if anything, he has been too lightly torched. I would
agree.
like to torch this man 100 times over. I mean, this crime that this man committed does not even, it feels weird to even compare it to things that have disqualified other competitors.
I know.
Obviously, we know Sha'Carri Richardson, who was disqualified for testing positive for cannabis a couple years ago. And again, every country has different standards, different requirements. There's a Japanese gymnast that was disqualified for smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
For smoking a cigarette. So I think the Dutch committees that allow this, I don't really think any gold medal is really worth having a convicted rapist performing on behalf of your team.
It's also just like, why do you want this man to represent your country? Like, is that really
his victim?
Yeah,
the victim, and seeing this, it's
God.
Torch this man 1,000 times. All right, last up, our third and final torching of the week involves a sportscaster getting canned by his employer over sexist remarks he made during Olympic swimming coverage. Did you see this, Blake?
I sure did.
So Bob Ballard, he is a broadcaster for Eurosport, and Eurosport has removed him. He's a longtime commentator. He's been removed from their Olympic lineup after the comment he made on Saturday night. So the comment in question, it came after the Australian team won gold in the women's 4x100 meter freestyle relay. He said, quote, "Well, the women just finishing up, you know what women are like, hanging around doing their makeup." This is just such a stupid thing to say.
It's so dumb.
Also, what is he talking about? They weren't done. They just
They're literally in the water.
It didn't even make sense. Like this comment would still be sexist had they maybe come finished a little slower than expected. And he was like, "What were they doing? Their makeup?" It just logically did not track, which is enough to fire this man on its own. But on a scale of 1 to 5 flames, how torched is this guy right now?
I'm gonna say, I mean, it's hard to not give all of these fives. I'll say 3 out of 5, maybe 4.
Such an easy thing to just not say.
I know. And if he's a veteran commentator like they're saying he is, are you kidding? Also, it's like, how has he not been torched before? That's what I'm thinking about.
This man needs some imposter syndrome.
He needs imposter syndrome, and he maybe needs a little class on what not to say.
There was a woman that was like with him, his co-commentator, who was just immediately, she was like, "That's outrageous." I did see some reaction to this, like he's going to get fired over this. But like we've been saying, this is just like weak commentary.
Yeah.
It made
be
no
more
sense.
original.
It was not logically sound. It was just a dumb thing to say. No reason to. This guy didn't show me anything that made me think, oh, this guy really needs to be commentating on swimming. All right, that's it for today's episode of Well Played. Be sure to rate, review, and follow the show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening now. It helps us out so much. It takes a second. Just go do it right after this. You can also follow us on Instagram at theSkimm, and be sure to check out our YouTube channel. That way you can see today's full episode on YouTube. And we have a lot of fun sitting here in front of the cameras, so check it out. We'll be back on Thursday with more gold medal takes, of course. And until then, thanks for listening to Well Played,
The only podcast in a league of its own.